A Little Man. Story by Ezra Mallard. Edna had been sick. Her doctor said it would be a good idea for her to go to the country. So she and her husband Dale rented a house out in the woods for the summer. On the way up, they saw a deer, and while they were unpacking, their daughter Susie said she saw a raccoon. Susie was 10 years old. She had never spent time in the woods. In fact, this was her first time camping. Like her parents, she was excited to go to the country. She hadn't really considered that she would be so bored. No, she thought it was going to be an adventure, a chance to try something new. But with her mom sick and her dad either playing nurse or doing paperwork, she was left on her own. Without friends, TV, or video games, her only options were to stay inside or go in the backyard. The backyard was full of overgrown weeds and wildflowers. It was partitioned off by an old broken picket fence. Trees hung over the fence, and when there was a gust of wind, the leaves would rustle. She liked that sound of the leaves rustling. All things considered, she didn't mind staying out there with all those weird flowers and smells. Once she gave in to being bored, it was actually kind of nice. Sometimes she would see a squirrel or a mouse. She wasn't allowed to leave the backyard, but it didn't take long for her to break that rule and explore the woods. The property next door had been fenced off, but over the years the posts had been ripped out or went missing, so she could easily walk over it. There was a barn and the remnants of a house which had been demolished a long time ago. She also found a well, but that had been plugged up so she couldn't throw stuff down it. The barn was dilapidated and bloated on the sides. She thought it looked funny, like something you would see in a cartoon. As she got closer, it stopped being so funny. She got this feeling like she was being watched. She stopped to look around and make sure she was alone. She couldn't see anyone, but she still had the creeps. She chalked it up to being alone in a strange place. It was dirty inside the barn. There were large mounds of sawdust, piles of cables, and an old sawhorse with some bits of leather and rope. She figured the leather was once a harness for cattle that had gone rotten, so now it was nothing. She didn't think the barn was anything to get excited about, but at least it was something new. She began sneaking off regularly. Sometimes she would find little treasures, like rusty clamps or an old screwdriver or a spoon and nails. There were lots of nails. Edna didn't want Susie leaving the backyard. No. She didn't want her getting lost in the woods. Dale was fine with it, but he made a point to chastise Susie for wandering off, for Edna's sake. But Susie didn't listen to her mom or her dad and kept sneaking off. Dale found her over by the barn. He told her how dangerous it was, but she just laughed. "I mean it," he said. "That thing will collapse on you." "Oh sure," she said. He gripped her arm and told her once more to stay out of there. She stopped laughing when he gripped her and promised she would. One night Edna was talking in her sleep. She wasn't saying anything Dale could understand. It was just a bunch of strange non-words. The room was dark. There wasn't even any moonlight. He wished the lamp was on so he could see. Eyes open or closed. Any light would be a relief from her gibberish. But he couldn't move. He didn't want to move. He lay there in the dark and listened, as if all the world had become her fever talk. The next day, Susie was out in the backyard. It was really muggy out, but she didn't mind because it really brought out the smells and the flowers. Dale had gone out to check on her, and he heard her singing a filthy song. He had never heard it before, but it was "Lick It Before You Stick It." He called her over and asked her where she heard that song. She pointed towards the barn. "The little man told me," she said. He clenched his jaw and asked her to tell him about the little man. She held her fingertips close together. "He's that big, and he lives in the barn." Dale relaxed. Obviously this was her imaginary friend. Still, he asked her if he had done anything else. "Nah," she said, "he just talks." "Has he taught you any more songs?" her father asked. She said he did, and when pressed to sing them, they were atonal nonsense songs, unlike that first song. She hesitated when she sang them like she was making them up on the spot. He couldn't help grinning when he told her to stay away from that barn and that man. She said she would. Even though he was sure the little man was imaginary, he made a point to go down to the barn just in case there was some guy talking to his kid. On his way down, he got the creeps like he wasn't alone. He tried to laugh it away, but he just couldn't shake that feeling. He couldn't find anyone in there, but he understood why a place like that would appeal to a child. He could picture himself as a kid climbing up to the loft and leaping down into a big pile of sawdust. He accidentally stopped on a small structure made out of sticks. It crunched loudly under his foot. Hidden amongst the sticks was a huge piece of wood with a nail sticking up. Had he stepped on the nail, it would have went through his foot. He picked up the wood and smashed it against the wall till the nail bent. Then he took an old rusty wrench and threw it at a window. The glass shattered, and he felt better. Sometimes breaking someone else's window will do that. That night while making supper, he found that all the cutlery was messed up. Spoons were bent, the fork spokes were twisted, and the butter knives were missing. He yelled at Susie, but he insisted it had to have been him. At that point, he was more exhausted than anything, so he sent her to bed before he went too far and said something he would regret. Then he unbent the forks and spoons as best as he could. Edna had been in bed all day. She had heard the yelling, and when he came upstairs with her soup, she asked him what happened. He laughed it off. Susie said a dirty word's all. Her eyes drooped. She was too weak to finish her soup. He took the bowl off her and was about to leave when she called over to him and said, "Don't be too hard on Susie." He nodded and left. It was a muggy night and Dale couldn't sleep. Edna lay beside him, snoring softly. The sheets were wet. He could smell her sweat, that particular musk off of sick people that lingers, tickles, in your nostrils like a stray mustache hair. He got up and went to the kitchen. He walked softly so he wouldn't wake anyone. The fridge door was open, and for a split second, he thought he saw little green eyes glowing in the dark. Then he tripped over something. It clattered and crunched under his feet. He let out a cry and did a little pain dance. There was a complex mess of hay, sticks, wires, and bits of metal soaked in milk. It had been destroyed when he tripped it, but parts of it had survived. From what he could make out, he had tripped over a robot wicker man with little green lights. It had been placed by the fridge. It was propping the door open. In the fridge, the carton of milk had a hole in it. The milk had drained over the food and collected around the floor under the fridge. He cleaned it up and sat at the table. He wondered why Susie would do that to him. He wasn't necessarily angry. In fact, a part of him marveled at the craftsmanship that went into that statue. It even had working lights for eyes. Can you imagine that? He thought twice about throwing it out, but it was junk after all, so he bagged the robot up. Then he saw a spark out in the hallway, like someone flicked a lighter. When he turned to look, it was gone. He went down the hall, but there was nothing there, though he did find a small hole in the window's mesh. He poked his finger through it and felt the edges. They were sharp like little teeth. The next day, Dale saw a rat. It ran from the living room into the kitchen, then disappeared into one of the cabinets. He looked, and even after he took everything out, he still couldn't find it. If he hadn't seen the rat, he would have blamed last night's mess on Susie. He knew she made the robot, which he could forgive, but the mess just seemed vindictive. In a way, he was relieved that the rat had gone in and chewed through the carton, because it was easier to be angry at an animal, or that was his theory anyway. She denied making the robot, but he had expected her to deny it. He thought about how he had yelled at her over the spoons, and figured she was just scared of getting in trouble now. He worded it differently, just to clarify. He said, "The problem with the robot was it held the door open, and a rat got in and made a mess." "But it didn't," she said. "It must have been that little..." But she stopped herself before she said it. The little man. Dale rolled his eyes, and they laughed. They went to the co-op to get some rat traps. She had fun helping him set them up. He showed her how they kill by snapping the wire with a stick. She shrieked and giggled after the crack of the trap. He did it again, and again. That night he lay in bed with his arm around Edna. The rattle in her chest was getting worse. He was watching the curtains flapping, hitting the wall while clouds pulled away from the moon. Then a trap snapped. In the bathroom, a small black lump lay in the trap. It was twitching. He wasn't sure if it was dead, so he got a grocery bag, slipped the rat in, and stomped on it a few times. Then another trap snapped, and another. He carried the bag with him while he followed the sounds. Amidst his wanderings, all the other traps had gone off, but when he went to check them, they were empty. While he was resetting one in the living room, he found a piece of gristle. It was wet, and there was some blood. He figured it must be a piece of tail, but it looked like a little leg. He wiggled it. It moved like a little leg, like a little people leg. None of the traps went off like that again, and after a few weeks, they had forgotten about rats. Susie had even stopped bugging him about little men in the barn. And then one morning, Edna was really sick, and he wanted to take her to the hospital. No, water, she said. Just water. While he was getting her a glass of water from the bathroom sink, Susie came in. She asked, "Is Mom?" But she couldn't finish the sentence. Dale tried to smile. He told her it was just a scratchy throat. As he went back to the bedroom with the water, she followed him, but he wouldn't let her in. "I just wants to see's all," she said. "No," he said. "You go out and play." She stood there and tried to look past him into the room. Edna called out, "Listen to your father, Susie." Susie said, "It's too hot out to play." But Dale nodded, then he closed the door. And it was too hot out to play that day. It was so humid, you could barely breathe. They made sure to keep the doors and windows closed and the fans going just to keep things tolerable. But it wasn't just the heat, it was the flies. They had gotten really bad. Susie had asked about getting some spray to keep them away. But Dale said they couldn't spray because the chemicals might make her mom sicker. Susie went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table. She could hear them talking through the ceiling. Their voices. She couldn't understand the words. She just liked to listen to their muffled voices. She got bored and noticed a rat trap by the fridge. It was set. There was a piece of hot dog in its teeth. She took a fork and set it off. It made her jump and she smiled. She tried to reset it, but snapped on her and nearly caught her fingers. It took a few tries before she got it right. She set it off again. She took out the old hot dog hunk and got a new one. She cut off a piece and was about to put it in the trap when she noticed a stain on the wood. Blood. Just a little streak on the trap near the wire. Something had been caught in it. Her stomach churned at the thought of a mangled animal hiding, suffering. She put the trap back, but she didn't reset it. Then she thought better of it and set it again with a fresh piece of hot dog. Then she ate the rest of the wiener in the living room. But the flies had started getting inside the house. Their morning started to begin with the persistent sound of buzzing in their bedrooms. They would roll over and ignore it, but it would continue. Sometimes the bugs would even crawl on them. One even crawled in Susie's mouth. Sometimes the flies would bite, and the bites hurt more than a normal fly bite should. One night, Susie got bit real bad. She and Dale were at the supper table, and he was nagging her not to play with her mashed potatoes. But she hated mashed potatoes, and he knew that, but made them anyway. Then she shrieked and cupped her ear. He dropped one of the warped forks he couldn't bend back in the shape and ran to her. He caught the bug crawling on her neck. It was a big bug, He crushed it between his fingers. The blood had smeared along her jaw, and her hair was stuck to her neck. She was crying and scratching at it. He ran to the tub and put her head under the tap. He scrubbed the blood and dried her hair. After that, she was fine, but the bite left a little red bump behind her ear. Up to that point, he had been doing what he could to keep the flies away. He made sure the doors and windows were closed, and sealed the little hole in the hallway window's mesh. He had fly paper hanging all over the house, too. The paper caught a few flies, but the difference was negligible, in his opinion. Still, Susie liked the paper. She said it looks like a crazy tongue. The next day, he and Susie went to the co-op and got more fly paper and mesh nets to hang over the beds. He was worried about using candles on account of Edna's breathing, but the guy at the store said they were organic, and specifically made so as not to irritate asthmatics. Dale picked up a few, and since he was going to experiment with candles, he decided to give bug powder a try. Susie found a hat with a mesh mosquito mask and a pair of gloves and put them on in the store. She thought it was hilarious. She was having a good time, so he bought them for her, and she wore them on the ride home. They put the powder on the windowsills. They hung up the new fly paper and lit the candles in the kitchen. Then they ate hot dogs. Then they sat there and listened for flies. There was some buzzing, but not so much. Not as persistent as it was before. In the silences, they would make silly faces and nudge each other. When they heard one, they would groan and laugh. But by dusk, there wasn't any buzzing at all. They smiled at each other, and she asked him if all the animals were outside. Before he could answer, a trap snapped, and they jumped, and she laughed. But when they went to check the trap was empty. He said, "Flies must have kept the rat away." "Yeah," she said, "but we'll get him, won't we?" He tousled her hair, then reset the trap. The rest of the night went well. Though no other traps went off, the fly problem seemed to be resolved, and Dale slept deeply. But the flies got in anyway. They were buzzing around the room, and he slept while they crawled over his and his wife's bodies. Then one bit his shoulder and he came to. His skin was stiff, and when he moved it, it stung like a full-body sunburn. There were clusters of little bumps all over his body. There must have been hundreds of them. His muscles ached, and his hands and legs were swollen. Edna was still asleep. He peeled back the wet sheet to see the bumps on her back. Her face was swollen. He shook her awake. She was mumbling. He couldn't understand her. She pointed at the bumps on his arms and chest. I know, he said, as he ran around the room getting her clothes together. He was frantic. He was shaking. His guts were shaking in him. He stammered as he tried to explain that she needed to go to the hospital. But she didn't seem to understand. She just kept pointing at him and saying something muffled. He practically had to dress her, and then he dragged her out of bed. He opened the door. They were hit by a wave of flies. The house was full of them. There were so many he couldn't see. He tugged on her arm and pulled her down the stairs and out into the car. Then he ran back in the house and got Susie. The flies had chewed her up too. The hospital gave them some shots and cream to help with the bites. But Edna was much sicker, and the doctors wanted to keep her there. By the time they had a room for her, it was well after midnight. They had a nap in her room. Susie slept in bed next to her. Dale and Susie went home around 5 a.m. He told Susie to wait in the car while he looked around. The house seemed okay. There were still some flies, but nothing like that swarm earlier that morning. He put on the hat he bought Susie, while he wandered around the property looking for a nest or a hive. He tripped over a bunch of wires hidden in a bush and landed hard on his shoulder. His foot was all tangled up in it. He grabbed the wires and hauled them out of the bush. He dragged out dozens of tiny circuits with blinking green lights. There were also some forks which had been bent up and covered with a very fine metal that cross-hatched around the tines so that they resembled antennae. He dug into the bush and found very tiny boxes made from hay and flecks of that same metal. These boxes were so delicate that they fell apart as soon as he touched them. He figured this was yet another one of Susie's weird projects, like that fridge robot. Satisfied that there was no hive in or around the house, they drove back to the co-op and got more extermination supplies. They had some more fun spraying and lighting candles. Susie even got to wear her hat again. As he made his way upstairs, he noticed that someone had cut holes in the window screens. He went to the bedrooms and, just as he suspected, the netting over the beds had been torn apart, as if someone had cut them too. "Susie!" he screamed, but she didn't answer. As he stomped around the house, he thought about what he was going to say. He wanted to tell her how she nearly killed her mother. He began to consider that maybe it was time for her to know how serious Edna's health was. To let her know she could have died because of you. He knew that sort of figurative slap to the face would smarten her up, but he and Edna had talked about how they would tell their daughter about her mother's condition. That it wasn't just a matter of quote-unquote feeling tired. Her mother wasn't going to get any better. That made him pause. Did he really want to make her mother's dying a punishment? Then again, he could not deny that it would make her behave, and life would be a hell of a lot easier. But it would also do something to her, and like a witch's curse in a fairy tale, she would be broken and beyond him forever. He called out again, softer than before. As he made his way to the stairs, he found a lighter on the floor. It was an orange Bic lighter with the bottom cut open. There were little straps and flecks of metal coming out of it. It looked like a little jetpack. He flicked the lighter and a flame burst out of both ends. He dropped it. He picked it up, tried it again, but it wouldn't work. He had broken it. There was another open window nearby. There was a hole in the screen and bud powder on the ledge. But he noticed that there was something in the powder. A lump. With his finger, not even his finger, delicately, with his fingernail, he scratched at the powder. And the lump was a man, a little man. It was naked. It had only one leg and was lying on its side. He poked at it with his finger. The little man was dead. He pinched its long hair, lifted it up to get a better look. Its hair ripped off at the scalp, but he caught it in his palm before it dropped on the floor. While he fooled with the little man, he had inhaled some of the powder and began coughing and laughing. He shouted for Susie to get a jar. "Quick!" he yelled. When she came back with a jar, he held it under her nose. His eyes had gotten big. He was jiggling the thing around in his palms. "It's your little man," he said. She went pale when she saw it. Is he dead?" He nodded. "But you see? She smiled. While trying to shake the little man into the jar, it got caught on the folds of his palm and they lost the other leg. She tried to pick the leg out of his hand with a tweezer, but that just tore it off at the knee. He pressed his hand against the jar's mouth and smeared the leg parts off against the glass. They dropped on top of the dead man. Then they screwed the top of the jar. They collected the broken jetpack and the mass of wires and antennae forks out in the bush. They searched around the house for any more of its inventions. Susie found a silver tube about the size of a battery with little nubs on the side. Susie said the little nubs looked like buttons. He asked her how she knew they were buttons. She shrugged and said, "How else would it work?" Then she let out a little shriek. He thought she was hurt, but she smiled and ran her hand over it. "It pushes," she said. He put his hand over it, and there was a force pushing against his hand. When she tapped the side, the force got stronger. She was able to make the force so strong it pushed his arm all the way back. Then it fell apart in her hands. Around the house they found some other things, some small tools and weapons like a razor blade fused to a hairpin, but nothing as amazing as that little tube. Susie wanted to come with him to the barn, but he wouldn't let her. Who knows what other space-age traps the little man had set for them. Beneath the haystacks he found some more metal and straw structures, but they came apart as he tried to get the box out of the barn. On another visit to the barn, he found a metal dome underneath an old table. There was nothing inside, but it had strange markings. He took it back with him and fooled around with it and the other inventions, but he couldn't get any of them to work. After a month or so, he lost interest and put the box in the bedroom closet. Susie didn't seem to care about the inventions. She was more interested in the little man, in the jar. For the rest of the summer, both of them would spend their nights gazing into that jar. They marveled at its broken little body while the fans droned, blowing around the hot air and the caustic antiseptic smell of residual fly spray. They whispered about the little man. What was he? Where did he come from? Are there any more of them? She hoped there weren't any more. It was more fun if she had the only one. When we go home, she said, should we keep it in the living room or the basement? This had become a recurring topic, he had noticed, where they would put it when they go home. When she brought it up, home, he would stiffen and find some new way to deflect the question. This time, he asked her, where do you think it should go? She wanted it to go in the basement, behind some orange boxes. So we can forget about it, she said. And when we remember, we can dig it out and look some more. And from that point on, whenever she asked him about home, that was his response. Where do you think you would want to put it? And he noted that she would say a new place every time. It was as if she was trying to rebuild her home through her imagination. She would picture the jar and remember home. He had told her she couldn't show the man to her mother. She couldn't even know about it. It would just get her excited. And if she was ever going to get out of the hospital, she needed her rest. So, father and daughter lay on their bellies and looked at the little man. It was on its back. Its arms had curled up to its chest. Its eyes had rolled up into its skull. And as they stared into the jar, their faces stretched along the glass. The end.